Hello, guys, and welcome back to the Rovers Report, where today me and Tom are going to be taking you through our retain list. Rovers released their retain list today, this time last year, so we're expecting that anytime soon, really. So we just wanted to get this in before the official retain list comes out. Obviously, this is both of our opinions. We might disagree on some things. I'm sure you guys are going to disagree on some of our choices, but just bear in mind, this isn't the gospel. This is what we believe. The way we're going to run through this, I think, is we're going to start with the goalkeepers, defenders, midfielders, attackers. And I was just saying there to Tom actually that we're not going to touch on any of the loan players. We'll save that for a separate video, when it comes to sort of transfers we might want to make in the summer. But at the minute, we're just going to look at players that are currently contracted to us and what we want to do moving forwards. So Tom, I guess if you want to kick this one off, mate, with our goalkeepers, the number one for most of this season for us has been James Belshaw. I think most Rovers fans would say he's a bit of a fan favourite. Would you be keeping him on next year?
I would be keeping him on, yes. I know obviously maybe there's a bit of bias in terms of the fan favourite sort of stuff, but I feel like he was scapegoated slightly last season, mostly due to the fact that defence was pretty poor for the vast majority of the season. I think he is slightly susceptible to long ranges. We saw that against both Exeter and Sheffield Wednesday at home. Obviously, that Barry Bannon strike was pretty unstoppable, but I think there were occasions where perhaps he could have done a bit better with some longer range efforts that went in. But I think overall, in terms of reflexes, shot stopping, distribution, I think he's a top half League One keeper, in my opinion. I think we're lucky to have him. I think people kind of took him for granted, considering I think some of the stuff I've seen on the forum, people were sort of there were sort of rumours of him perhaps going back towards a Nottingham-based team or perhaps somewhere up there. I think he has a quality, obviously, maybe not to. I guess if we were to progress past the division, maybe not. But I think to keep him for the time being and to have that stability at the back would be wise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I don't know. It's been a sort of like a lingering thought for me. It's not that I disagree. I just personally think that if an experienced League One goalkeeper or someone who I would consider a little bit better came along, I wouldn't be adverse to moving him on. I know it sounds harsh, and he's done fantastically well for us, but I think your point about the defence is good because maybe that is a bit of clouding my judgment when it comes to Belly as a keeper. That we have shipped a lot of goals, and probably a lot of those aren't his fault. But I don't know. Again, it's something that my mind's been trained to. That for League One, you almost want the sort of figure of like a Balcom, where a very big goalkeeper, dominant in the area. So yeah, don't get me wrong. I've appreciated everything he's done, and I still think he could be a very good goalkeeper for us, and I would keep him actually. But I wouldn't be surprised if Barton looks for someone else over Belshaw in the upcoming season. I don't know.
Well, as you say that, I think there were definitely a few snippets in Barton's interviews in the second half of the season,
Mm,
kind of hinting towards maybe some of the fans' favourites, as you said, moving
yeah.
on. So perhaps, obviously, I think, as you said, you could perhaps going head over heart there. I'm
Mm,
going the opposite.
yeah.
I think it is just quite hard to find a sort of goalkeeper at this level who will be your number one throughout a whole
Yeah.
season. And obviously, if you get that wrong, it could be catastrophic. We had that same problem 2 seasons ago. Now, when we were relegated, or 3 seasons ago, I guess technically,
Mm,
when we were relegated from League One, we ended up with Van Stappershoff and Joe Day. I think
it's
we
true.
didn't have
Yeah.
a because Anzi was injured. I think if you get that decision wrong, it can be incredibly costly. And the fact that we have a regular number one in Belshaw, who I think is good enough at its
Mm,
level, I think it's obviously you're balanced the risk and reward, right, for that certain decision. I think maybe I'm being a bit risk averse, but I'd keep him.
yeah. I know what you mean. It's almost like rolling a dice, isn't it? If you sort of jettison Belshaw or say to him, "You're not going to be our number one," if you say that he's a three and you roll the dice, we could pick up a lone player from a big club who's going to come in and be a five or a six on the dice, or you roll it. you get to the end of the window, there's nothing left, and you've got to pick up a one or a two. So I completely understand what you're saying. I think if we want to progress up the division, I would probably be looking at a different keeper. But credit to Belshaw, he's been there for Rovers. He gets the club, and he's done well in his time. So yeah, I think we both agree I'd keep him, but I wouldn't shut the door on a potential other goalkeeper coming in. Moving on from Belshaw, I think this one's pretty easy. I don't think, I think the decision's already been made actually with Ansi Yakola. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he's retiring / moving into a coaching role within Rovers. So yeah, I think, he hasn't played much the last couple of seasons, but on his day, he's one of the best keepers that Rovers have had, I think, in terms of shot stopping. It's unfortunate for him that probably some of his best spells were when the fans weren't actually in the ground, but yeah, I think it's a bit of a weird one, Yakola. He's not going to go down in history with Rovers fans, but he's played his part, so fair play to him.
Yeah, exactly. I guess just to touch on that, I think, as you said, he was a very good goalkeeper in that sort of spell. When he first joined, I think it was that first half season when just before COVID
Mm.
under Coughlin, when I think we were second in League One in the live table on
Yeah.
Boxing Day, and he was in goal. I remember him making a couple of terrific saves away against Ipswich. So yeah, I mean, he's been incredibly unfortunate with injuries, and then barely came in to replace him. So,
Yeah.
I'm sure he'll do well in his coaching role. If he obviously was working as a goalkeeping coach for most of last season, so it's not going to be something alien to him.
Exactly. Yeah, I think when you look at Yakola in terms of his stature, that's sort of what I picture as a lower league goalkeeper. But times are changing, so that's fine. And then the final goalkeeper, which I think is a really exciting prospect, is young Jed Ward. He's obviously been out on loan this season in the National League South. In my notes here, I'd 100% keep him on. He's a great long-term prospect. I think when he's come into play, he's looked very capable. I'd be hesitant to thrust him into the limelight straight away. What I've got down is ideally get him to a League Two or a National League club, get him there for another season, potentially bring him back for a couple of cup games. Blood him in the pre-season fixtures, and I think I do believe in 1 or 2 years' time he could be the natural sort of successor to Belshaw or whoever else is in there, mate. So for me, it's a definite keep and try and get him a bit more game time.
Completely, mate. I think that the next step up for him is obviously National League or perhaps bottom half of League Two. So, if we can get him a move to a team in one of those divisions, it'd be beneficial for him. As you say, he's very much still a longer term prospect. So, someone to keep in the club. I think he must be under contract until the end of next season,
Mm-hmm.
2024, or maybe a bit later. He looked pretty cool, calm, and collected in that defeat against Port Vale, where he couldn't really have done much. Um, Again, that was perhaps a perfect example of the fact that the defence was more at fault for the goals than the keeper
Mm-hmm.
this season.
Bit of a theme, isn't
So yeah, yeah, exactly. And I guess we'll touch on that in a bit. But
it?
yeah, I think I agree. Keep Ward.
Yeah. All right, then. So that sort of rounds off our goalkeepers. I think, like we said, in seasons gone by, it's been a bit of a troublesome area for us. I think if we went into next season with those goalkeepers, I'd be more than happy with that. So yeah, moving on from goalkeepers to our defenders. And I think first up, let's start with two players who I believe both of us are probably going to want to keep on. I think most Rovers fans would agree with that, and that's Lewis Gordon and Luca Hall. Both young players, both had a sort of shaky start to their season. Hall was sort of shoved into centre back at times where he might not necessarily want to be playing there. Lewis Gordon, I think some people forget this is only his first season in adult football, and he's, as the seasons got on, got better and better. Same with Luca Hall, and both of these guys are contracted until 2024. So I don't think it's out of the question that Hall or Gordon might attract a bit of interest, but I imagine these are both firmly in Barton's plans moving forwards, mate.
Yeah, exactly. And it wouldn't surprise me if maybe a couple of championship clubs put in a sort of tentative offer for Hall this summer.
Mm.
Towards the end of the season, he was terrific. I remember in a derby game, David McGoldrick, who's obviously an experienced football league player and has played in the Premier League, was complimenting him towards the end of that match. Um, yeah, I think he's definitely come on leaps and bounds this season. As you said, kind of strong armed into playing centre half in the first
Hmm.
sort of month or two, whilst we had a shortage there. But when he plays right back in a four, I think he's definitely our best, arguably our best defender. So looking forward to seeing him playing the quarters next season and pushing on from this season. And same with Gordon, sort of, I guess, grew into his role in the team. I think better as a left back and a four rather than the wing back.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think those two could be our full backs next season.
Yeah, yeah. I think you mentioned your team to me earlier today, and that's what I'd certainly be going for. And then moving on to our other two wing backs that we've got contracted to the club, and that is Callum McDonald and James Gibbons. I'll start with McDonald. Very strange one, to be honest, isn't it? He was brought in January, sort of last minute, came from Stockport where he wasn't getting many minutes there. Um, and he hasn't really done anything. In my opinion, I would release him. I think Barton's obviously had enough time to look at him. Clearly doesn't fancy him. I think some people would make the argument for, I think people are saying that Shrewsbury looked all right. But I think if you're really looking to progress up this division, you can't have any passengers for me. And I think just use the wages elsewhere. It was a bit of a shot in the dark. It hasn't paid off. It hasn't been costly, but for me, I think I'd look to move him on. And then Gibbons for me, he's contracted until 2024. His season's been blighted by injury a bit, a bit stop start, but I think he's exactly the sort of player that every squad needs. Someone that can fill in, slot into loads of different places. He'll give 100% every time, and I've got down in my notes. He might not be a starter for us, but I guarantee there'll be a point this season where we rely upon him, and he has to come in and do a job. And those sort of players are hard to pick up. So yeah, keep Gibbons, and for me, release McDonald.
Agree with both of those. I guess I won't touch on McDonald too much because you spoke about the fact that I guess he was brought in as a backup or someone on a rotational basis.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, it hasn't worked. So I think it'd be best if I guess we released him. In terms of Gibbons, he's got a lot of stick on social media recently, I feel. I don't really know what people kind of expected of him. But I think he's quite a solid player, to be honest. He could play right back,
Mm-hmm.
right wing back, left wing back. Can probably play as a right centre half and a three. He actually played a lot of games, if I remember correctly, in that run that we had in sort of November, December. We went up from
Mm-hmm.
sort of low mid table to just outside the playoffs. I think he played a lot of games. So I think he's quite a solid player actually.
Yeah,
Obviously, he's not going to be a Cafu, League One Cafu like Luca Hall,
yeah,
running down the wing. But I think, yes, someone to have around the squad to sort of fill in any gaps and to come on when needed. I think solid squad player. So yeah, looking forward to hopefully seeing him next season.
yeah. I think that's a theme for a lot of our players actually is we've seen a lot of them sort of at 60, 70%. If we can get them firing next season, I think we'll have a really good squad. And I think to round off the defenders, um, we'll look at James Connolly. He was imperious for us in that promotion season alongside Connor Taylor. Hasn't quite worked out for him this year, in my opinion. But we've got him contracted until 2025. And I think he's still definitely got his best years ahead of him. I think he obviously didn't, what's the word? He wasn't helped by the fact that our defence was ever changing. I think a bit of solidity and the same players alongside him for a sustained period of time will really help him out. And hopefully we get that next season. So I can't really see any sort of argument for letting him go. We signed him
No,
clearly.
not at all.
So yeah, I don't know if you've got anything else you want to add to that, mate.
Pretty much said what I would have said. Again, a player who's only going to become better. And I think would he be my starting centre half in maybe in the three, but not in two.
Mm-hmm.
I think he needs someone next to him who obviously it worked so well. Connor Taylor, who's slightly, I guess, more physical. Um, I think the physicality of strikers in League One. I guess, well, I mean, you have some big brutes in League Two that he had to deal with.
Mm,
Like you probably have that sort of added pace, that extra yard of pace that every striker has in League One. So
yeah.
I think certainly someone who's probably learned a hell of a lot this year, um, and someone I think would be good to have perhaps as a backup for next season. Um, but then, as you said, contracted to 2025. Sorry, so I think, yeah, I think someone who's got a hell of a lot of potential.
Yeah.
Looking forward to having him around.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a very fair assessment, mate. So we've done the defenders there. There is Jamie Egan, but I personally don't feel in a position to comment about that. I know he's been out on loan, and it's no disrespect to him. I just think that for me to make a comment on it, probably I'm not in the best position to. So not that we're brushing over him, but that rounds off our first team squad for the defenders. We go into our midfield now, mate. I'm conscious of the fact that I've sort of led the way giving my explanation on any of these. So I'll throw it over to you if you've got a player or a couple of players you want to start on, and just sort of walk me through what you think.
Yeah, of course. I think the player that most would be talking about would be Grant Ward. Obviously, we signed him in January on a short-term contract after he left Blackpool. He has
Mhm.
experience of League One and Championship. Obviously, he was promoted from League One to the Championship with Blackpool just a couple of seasons ago. I think he started off quite slowly, to be honest. You could tell that he wasn't probably match fit. I kind of thought that he was passing the ball sideways quite a bit, and then I think it was more towards the beginning of March where he sort of became a lot more progressive.
Mhm.
And he's a very competitive, good box to box midfielder. Someone I think um, definitely, I think he definitely helped Begard as well. I obviously I think most Rovers fans would share the same opinion of me in terms of offering him a longer contract, probably a 2-year contract, to
Mhm.
stave off any competition from other clubs.
Yeah. How difficult do you think that will be? Do you think there's going to be other clubs sniffing around him?
I think when you compare that sort of situation to other scenarios, it would be, geographically, are we at a disadvantage? Obviously, you think in the past, a lot of players up north, obviously, we have to compete with teams like in the Greater Manchester area and
Yeah.
etc. etc. I think he's from London originally, and obviously, every player situation is different in terms of how close they are to home. But I think that probably wouldn't be a factor. I think financially, the fact that we're freeing up wages from Yakola, obviously, I guess we'll touch on Rodman and
Yeah.
Whelan as well leaving. So I think it'd be worth giving him a good offer, considering he'd be our starting number eight.
Yeah.
Arguably someone who could be captain as well. So I
Yeah.
think obviously we obviously have to give a good offer because there'll be some good clubs after him, but we're not going to break the bank for him.
No, I completely agree, Matt. I think he'd be probably the first name that I'd want to get re-signed after maybe Lewis Gibson. But I think hopefully it's in our favour the fact he's already played for us. He seems to enjoy playing here, and geographically, like you said, if he is a London lad, then it's not too far away for him. So yeah, I completely agree on that. Um, I think the best place to move on from there would be to probably two players. Again, we're going to try and keep the more juicy ones towards the end. The two players that I think I might be wrong here, but I believe most Rovers fans, and you included, would just be very keen to keep on, and that is Sam Finley and Anthony Evans. I think it's probably fair to say both of them again haven't had their best seasons. Evo, especially at the start, was quite poor. But they've both had spells where they've been in a good vein of form. I'm not going to touch on it too much because we all know what their attributes are and how useful they are for Rovers. I think for me, one thing I do want to say on Evans is, I'm looking through our midfielders here, and he probably is one of the only ones there that provides the creative spark from midfield. And I think that might be a case of it's one of those where we might not know what we've got until he's gone. I could see that being a quite a difficult position to replace Anthony Evans, and the drive and the creativity he provides is something that I think Barton values, and I don't imagine either of them will be looking elsewhere, or Barton will be looking to ship them on.
Yeah, I agree. I think Evans is actually underrated by Rovers fans,
Mm,
perhaps because he's received so much stick over the last sort of season. I think, as you said, he has that creative spark. I think he was scapegoated perhaps at the beginning of the season because we were losing games. We were actually scoring quite a lot of goals, and he was playing a part in some of those. Um, he's had his spells out the team. Yeah, I think he wasn't as good last season as he was in his first season in League Two.
Hmm.
Obviously, the same goes for Finley. I think Finley was kind of caught on the ball a few times towards the end of the season. Yeah, I think they're two players that we definitely need to have around.
Yeah.
Perhaps I think, and I guess we'll go through in another video about ideal teams or
Mhm.
starting 11s for next season. I can't say whether um, either of them would start alongside Rossiter. It would be my choice for the pivot. But definitely two players we need to have around.
Yeah, I agree, mate. So yeah, I think, like you said, Whelan and Rodman are both going to be moving on. You know, trying to keep the video short, but I appreciate both those players have played a massive role in the last couple of seasons. So big thank you to them, and hopefully, I believe, well, we'll definitely be seeing Whelan next season. I think.
Yeah,
Not sure about Rodman. I know he's taken up a role with the PFA, I believe. So yeah,
yeah, that's right.
we'll see what the future holds for them. Um,
And yeah, you might be on the PGA soon as well, going
yeah,
off his Instagram.
mate. Yeah, either that or run a
So
multi-million-pound business. So, I think
yeah,
he's probably well set for retirement. So fair play to him. But yeah, so on my list we've got four midfielders left. I'll let you take your pick on them. So it's Rossiter, Grant, McCormick, or Anderson.
roster for me, I'll start with. I think he was really instrumental in that run that we had before Christmas, and we missed him dearly when he was injured. He obviously is. I think it's fair to say he's quite injury prone.
Hmm.
Um, Throughout his career, he's had lengthy spells out, which is obviously pretty sad because he could have gone on to play at a very high level, having made his debut and scored for Liverpool. Um, so yeah, I think he's a great pivot. I think it took him a few games to get used to playing in our system, but I think he's definitely will be one of the first names on the team sheet if he's fit,
Hmm.
which is a big if. I think what he brings in leadership as well is underrated. So yeah, League One Busquets, in my opinion. I think,
Yeah,
yeah, I honestly think one of the first names on the team sheet and looking
yeah,
forward to hopefully seeing him back.
yeah, mate. I couldn't agree more with that. For me, I agree. I think he probably is top two first names on the team sheet. And where you've touched on the injuries there, what my thoughts on that are is what you've got to do if you're Barton is plan for a season without Rossiter. So you need to get players in that are going to be there if he isn't there. But having him as that sort of player that can come in, it's exactly what our team needs. So yeah, I think keep him, but plan as if he's not going to be there. I think, and going from one injury-prone player to another, this is one that I fear could cause a little bit of outrage amongst the Rovers fan base. And that is, for me personally, I would let Josh Grant go. His contract is up this summer. I know there's a few caveats to this where Rovers have obviously paid for all of his surgery, and his rehabilitation, and he's been in and around the squads. Um, and I just want to say as well, I think he's a fantastic footballer. Barton's obviously cited that I think he said he's the most intelligent footballer at the club or something along those lines. And it's clear that he's got ability, but you know, it's not his fault. But for me, he's been injured too much. And at this level, you can't have passengers. And I'd rather spend the money elsewhere. It's unfortunate for him. I think similar to what you said with I can't remember who you just said there that they'd be playing. Well, Rossiter, they'd be playing at a high level. He wasn't always injured, but you see it all the time with players like this, where you go, "Oh, we'll take a gamble on him," and he doesn't do anything. And unfortunately for me, I think it will happen again with Josh Grant. So yeah, for me personally, I would let him move on.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. I think the injuries have just outweighed the other side of the argument. To be honest, he's obviously a very talented player, but I think perhaps it'd be best if he saw that's just new.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. If you can get a player that's going to play 25 to 40 games at a 7 out of 10 level, or a player that will play 5 to 10 at 8 out of 10, I know which one I'd rather have. So yeah, like I said, it's unfortunate for him. I actually think Barton will not do that. I think you don't keep a player a year injured if you're not going to give him a chance at least. So I hope he proves me wrong, and I hope he goes on to have a successful season. And then yeah, I think we'll leave Harry Anderson till the end, but the penultimate midfielder, Luke McCormick. Do you want to kick us off on that, mate, or should I go?
I'll just say something short but sweet, I guess. I think not scapegoated. He had a poor season. I think, admittedly, didn't have much of a pre-season. He was ostracised by Wombles. Yeah, I think a quality player when he's fit and he's starting. And I think that lack of pre-season hampered his whole season. Really, is that too weak of an excuse? Maybe I'm being a bit biased because he was really good for us in the loan spell, but someone I definitely keep in the squad.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's bias. I think it's a fair reason. It doesn't quite justify why it was so poor, but I think it's certainly a contributing factor as to his poor start. So I agree. I'd keep him. Contracted until 25. So yes, keep him around. Hopefully, he can have a good season as well, and it'll be like a new player. And then finally, in the midfield positions, we've got Harry Anderson, who, for me, one of my favourite players during that promotion season. I love him as a player. And I know there's been a lot of speculation about him potentially moving on. I think I saw today MK Dons have been linked with him. And the way I see it is, I believe Joey Barton has probably given him an offer, saying you won't be a first team regular. You're probably going to be a squad player. Therefore, we can't offer you this much money. Harry Anderson probably has come back and said, I want more money and I want more game time. And they've sort of hit an impasse. Me personally, I'd keep him all day. But he's a bit like an attacking James Gibbons, if you know what I mean, in terms of a utility player. He's always going to give you whatever he's got. So for me, I'd certainly keep him around.
Yeah, agreed with you on that one.
Yeah, yeah. I think most Rovers fans would, to be honest, wouldn't they? So yeah, and then going into the forward positions, this is actually probably there's not a huge amount of um, discussion to be had here. I think if I just rattle it off now, mate, Collins, obviously we'll keep him if we can keep a hold of him from other people coming in. Scott Sinclair, he signed till 24, so in my opinion, keep him around, good on and off the pitch. I guess there could be a bit more of a discussion between the final two in Marquis and Ryan Loft. For me, I've said keep both. Marquis, he did really well towards the end of the season, and he's a great option to have, be it if he starts or if he comes off the bench. You don't get many players that are proven at this level, and he certainly is. So I'd keep him, and then Lofty for me, keep him. Offers something different. He's one of those sort of players that's definitely going to grow into a better player as time goes on. And yeah, that's my opinions on the strikers. I know it's sort of short and sweet, but I don't think there's too much discussion to be had there. I don't know what you think on that.
I agree with you on Marquis. I disagree with you on Loft there. I think we need to be a bit ruthless and let him go because I think we're going to be freeing up some wages to bring in possibly a loan or another permanent striker to challenge Marquis. And Loft's returns haven't been good enough for me. We had some great memories with him. Obviously, Port Vale away, especially. He had that purple patch midway through last season. I just think he hasn't really shown enough, to be honest. I agree with you on Marquis. I think Marquis could even be our starting nine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think his returns 12, 13 goals. And considering he started probably half the league games,
It's good.
pretty impressive. Is really good and his hold up play is excellent. So yeah, I definitely keep Marquis. I think Lofts we should let go. I think he needs to go down to League Two and play regularly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it might be one of those strikers that it might be one of the strikers that we regret letting go.
Mm-hmm.
Um, certainly, there have been a few of those over the years, but obviously, I think it's not like the writings on the wall, but it's very much. I think a financial decision, the opportunity cost is just too large of holding him. So I think with that
No,
in mind, I'd look to bring in someone else.
I think that's totally fair, mate. To be honest, because my initial reaction to that was it leaves us a bit short up front. If you've got Sinclair, Collins, and Marquis. But having said that, Barton will definitely be bringing in players this summer. So I think you could well be right there. It'll be interesting to hear what you guys think. It's slightly strange on actually our squad. I think it's quite stable for once. There's not going to be too many ins and outs, certainly from the players we already have contracted. So yeah, I think that's pretty much every player summed up there. That was perfect. Thank you very much for coming on, Tom.
No
Um,
worries, mate.
as I said, I want to hear your guys' thoughts. So let us know who you'd be keeping and who you'd be letting go. And if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, and we'll see you later.